Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. My name is Clayton Fletcher, and I am in safe, affordable, bucolic New York City. Happy to be bringing you yet another edition of the world's longest running poker strategy podcast. I just returned home from California. I had some corporate gigs in the Southern California area. A lot of fun. I really enjoyed my visit to some of the local card rooms out there. By the way, shout out to Xanadu 19, who I actually met in person. Now, Xanadu 19 is a regular podcast listener. He's also a frequent visitor to the Tournament Poker Edge free roll online. And he sat down next to me. I was playing in a cash game, 5, 10, 20 PLO action, just mixing it up with the locals in Lake Elsinore, California. And I was having a fun time. This guy comes up to me. He says, "Hey, you're Clayton Fletcher. I'm a listener, everything." It's Xanadu 19. After he only sits at the table for less than 5 minutes, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to get going." I was like, "Well, you just got here." He's like, "Yeah, but I don't know how to play PLO." I just wanted to come and say hi. So I gave him the password. Now, this guy claims to have won the TPE free roll at some point in the past, which is more than I can say for myself. I have final tabled it a few times, but maybe 2 times, but I have never actually won it. Carlos Welch, bracelet winner, Carlos Welch, I should say. Forgive me, Carlos. You must say bracelet winner. Yeah, Carlos won the free roll maybe about a year ago now. But yeah, guys, I'm just here to tell you, if you're looking for some good action, I highly recommend the EconoLodge in Lake Elsinore. And no, that's not a joke. The big news this week was that somebody won his 18th ring, his circuit ring, and this is a player that stirs up a lot of controversy wherever he goes. His name is Maurice Hawkins, and he, I guess, now has 18 circuit rings, but there was a lot of controversy at his recent final table where the player who went out in third place actually had the winning hand at Showdown, but they allowed him to bust anyway. At one point, he even says, "Wait, didn't I win? I thought I won." And they dispatch him from the tournament area. And then Maurice got down to heads up with some other fool, and he took it down and won another circuit event. And guys, this has been pretty well hashed out all week long on Twitter and elsewhere, but let me just add in my 2 cents. I believe that if the WSOP is going to continue to increase the rake percentage in these tournaments, whether they be bracelet events or ring events, rake is increasing across the board. Some of that money that they're making and that they're getting their greedy little hands on should be spent training dealers. And there's no reason for any hand and any major tournament final table to go down this way. There should have been a supervisor on hand. I feel like we need a lot more people in suits and ties paying attention to what's going on when there are literally hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake. And so I really feel bad for the player who actually kind of knew that it was supposed to be his pot. He's like, "Oh, I thought it was what happened is 4 to a flush came out and the dealer missed it and pushed the pot to Hawkins instead." But guys, I mean, look, dealers make mistakes, and even extremely well-trained dealers such as those at the Wynn Resort, Las Vegas, which are probably the best in the world, or among the best anyway, for sure. I haven't been all over the world, but I've never seen better dealers than they have at the Wynn. And they'll make mistakes from time to time as well. But this is a major tournament final table with prestige of a circuit ring at stake, along with hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's just no reason why we shouldn't have multiple sets of eyeballs on all of the action, making sure the players aren't cheating, making sure the dealers don't make any mistakes. Just because this final table was not live streamed doesn't mean it shouldn't count for anything. And this bothers me a lot. Game integrity is an issue that's coming up more and more, especially in the online space. But this is an example of live game integrity. And the ball was dropped by so many that it's actually an embarrassment to the game. All right, enough about that. Let's get into it, guys. We've got some serious catching up to do. I have so many hands in the hopper that have been introduced on this podcast, but not reviewed with my solver of choice, which of course is GTO Wizard. GTO Wizard, in my opinion, the top tool on the market to help you improve your game. You can study any spot. You can practice against a GTO opponent using artificial intelligence to kick your butt. You can look and plug in your hands and see where the leaks in your game are. And it's just great. It's very easy to use. I'm not a techie, and I have no issues at all working with this amazing solver program. So if you are interested in giving it a try, I've got a great deal for you. You get 24 hours unlimited free access to all of GTO Wizard's features. And then when that trial period ends, once you're ready to buy, you can save 10% off your first purchase if and only if you click the link in the description of this podcast. It's our affiliate link, and it gets you that discount, gtowizard.com/p/TPE. So several weeks ago, we talked about a hand that was played in the 2024 WSOP main event. We're going to put the key decisions into the solver and find out what the wizard has to say. So it's day 2, nowhere near the money. Anthony Ortega opens under the gun with pocket queens, and the action folds to Liv Fan on the button, who 3-bets to 7,500. The blinds were 600, 1,200. Everybody has heaps and heaps of chips. He opens under the gun 2,700. She 3-bets on the button to 7,500 with the ace-4 offsuit. So Liv, let's look at the button first. Liv, her play here is 100% solver disapproved. She can 3-bet ace-jack off, ace-10 off. She doesn't have any other offsuit aces that 3-bet below ace-10. So it's just ace-10 through ace-king. She does 3-bet occasionally with ace-4 suited. Now here she has ace-4 offsuit, which is a fold. But she can 3-bet with ace-4 suited 25% of the time. Call the rest. Ace-5 suited, my favorite hand, 50% of the time is a 3-bet and call the rest. But she shouldn't be playing ace-4 off at all. So for the rest of this solver review, we should know that Liv is already way out of line and even starting with a hand she should actually never have. Ortega facing a 3-bet, his call is standard, but 22% of the time we do want to 4-bet with pocket queens. Same for pocket jacks, by the way. A little bit less often with 10s and 9s, and of course more often with aces and kings and ace-king suited or not. But yeah, calling is fine 78% of the time, so good job, Anthony Ortega. And then the 2 see the flop with 18,000 in the middle. It comes jack of diamonds, 8 of spades, trey of diamonds, and Ortega does not have a diamond, but his pocket queens are an overpair. He checks to the 3-better, and Liv puts in 2,500 into the 18,000 pot. So a tiny little bet here, just 2 big blinds. And the wizard says Liz, of course, can't have ace-4 offsuit, but she does have a small part of her range. 2% of the time, she is making this itty-bitty bet. It's just never with ace-4 offsuit. Most of the range that Liv wants to bet, she's going to bet either quarter pot or half the pot. And we hardly ever check this flop at all. Having 3-bet pre-flop, we're supposed to only check it back 1% of the time. Now back to Ortega under the gun. He says, what do you mean 2,500? That's too small. I check raise to 7,500. At that point, Liv Fan actually folded her nothing hand ace-4 offsuit. But let's talk about Ortega's raise. I was very surprised by this solver output. Obviously, we're never going to fold queens, not on this flop. But the wizard says we're actually supposed to call this itty bitty bet most of the time, 75% of the time. We make this type of raise, like a 3x raise, only about 6% of the time. And the rest of the time, we want to go bigger with our queens. So we can call the tiny bet 75%, and 20% of the time, we're supposed to check raise big. The wizard is not crazy about this 3x. It's only about a 6% play. All right, so that's the end of that hand. I just wanted to circle back to it because I did promise when I first introduced that hand that we would go back and review it at a later date. So now we can check that off my list. And let's talk about a couple of weeks ago when I had two guests on the program, Alex Fitzgerald and his esteemed poker co-author, Dan Goggin. No, sorry, Dan Goggin, that's his uncle who invented nonsense. I'm talking about Topher Goggin, the nephew, who is a poker author and an attorney. Really successful family, those Goggins. Anyway, Alex Fitzgerald and Topher Goggin and I discussed this hand, which Alex had played on an online site, $44 six-max tournament, but he only had 4 players total at his table. In this hand, the button opened to 3x off of a stack of 200 big blinds, and Alex was in the small blind holding pocket threes, and he decided to 3-bet to 9 big blinds. The big blind folded and the button called the 3-bet, but let's talk about this 3-bet because the wizard actually lists pocket trays as a 100% pure call from the small blind. We also want a pure call with pocket 5s, pocket 4s, and pocket deuces, and we never 3-bet any pocket pair below 6s, but starting at 6s on up, we do have a lot of 3-bets in the range. We also have some very strong flats in the range for the small blind to kind of make up for the fact that so many of our flats are going to be these small pairs. We also occasionally flat with hands like ace-king suited, ace-queen suited, and even pocket aces, pocket kings. Now, usually those hands will be 3-betting, but this is the way the solver balances out that small blind flatting range. So we need to be calling with hands other than speculative hands like small pairs and suited connectors. So that's how the solver handles this problem, which we definitely discussed 2 weeks ago. Another thing that came up is that I wanted to go 4x the original raise. So if he made it 3, I wanted to make it 12.5. Now the wizard agrees with me. When we're out of position, we want to add an extra big blind, roughly, to the 3-bet sizing. So if you're in position, like on the button, you can maybe just do 3x like Liv Fan did with an unadvisable hand in the previous scenario. But when you're doing it from the blinds, you're going to be out of position. And for that reason, you want to make it 4 or 5 times the original raise. So yeah, I think it's been confirmed that Alex's 3-bet sizing was a little on the too small side. So now there's 19.5 big blinds in the pot, and the effective stack is 94 big blinds, and the flop comes Jack, Jack, 6 with 2 clubs. Alex has pocket trays with no club and bets about a quarter of the pot, 5.75 big blinds, and villain calls. So solver, as we mentioned, never has pocket trays because it's a pure call pre-flop, but we can look at how the solver would play a different pocket pair, maybe a hand like pocket 7s, pocket 8s, pocket 9s. They all prefer this sizing. So the sizing is good. A quarter pot on this paired board is the way to go. And then the villain calls, and now with 31.5 big blinds in the middle, the turn comes the 5 of spades. So Jack, Jack, 6, 5 with 2 clubs. Alex decides to check. The villain takes a big stab at it, betting 20 big blinds into the 31.5 big blind pot, and Alex finds a call with pocket trays. And the solver, I think, would like this if trays were actually in our range, because all of the other pocket pairs, pocket 7s, pocket 8s, pocket 9s, and pocket 10s, all pure calling here on the turn. Now, that doesn't mean that pocket 9s is the same as pocket 3s, but because 3s are not in the range, we've got to try to approximate. Anyway, now there's 71 and a half big blinds, and the effective stack is only 68 big blinds. So we've got roughly a pot-sized bet left when the river comes the 7 of clubs, completing the flush, as well as a couple of highly unlikely straights. So Alex checks once more. Villain takes another shot at this pot, betting 47 big blinds into the 71 and a half big blind pot, and Alex makes the call. Villain turns over Queen 9 with the Queen of Clubs for a missed everything, and Alex wins this huge pot with a pair of threes. The solver obviously doesn't have threes, but we do have pocket eights at this point, so let's see how GTO Wizard would play pocket eights facing this large bet sizing on the river. And if the Wizard has a club, the Wizard makes the call. And if the Wizard has eights with no club, the Wizard folds. So I'm trying to figure this one out, guys. I mean, if we have a club in our hand, I guess that just makes it less likely that we're facing a flush. So we block some flushes, and that seems to be all it takes to make calling correct. I found that incredible. And I think we can all agree this hand is even more interesting if Alex starts with a pair of eights instead of a pair of threes. All right, let's do another one. I want to review all the hands that we haven't been able to get to. And that brings me to last week's episode with Killing Bird, Derek Tenbush, who, if you guys haven't heard that episode, go back and listen. We review the entire WSOP schedule for 2025. And we talked about a hand where I played an online PKO with a buy-in of $33. And we were not yet in the money, but registration was closed. So we were in that sweet spot when there's no more buying in, but you're not quite in the money yet. The blinds were 1,800 and 3,600 with a 450 ante per player. And we had 128,000, which is about 35 big blinds. This is a blind versus blind situation. The small blind limps in, and I am in the big blind with the 8 of spades, deuce of spades. And I decided to check. I remember Derek and I didn't really give too much thought to whether we should ever be raising with this awful hand. But the Wizard does actually raise it about 40% of the time to 3.5 times the big blind. Now, I think that perhaps the rationale for doing so is that we want to be polarized. So if somebody limps in, we can mostly check our medium strength hands, and we're going to be raising our very best and possibly some of our very worst hands. And 8 deuce is certainly one of the worst hands you can have, but when it's suited, it does have a few more bailouts, at least in terms of playability post-flop. So I can see where the reasoning why we do want to raise fairly often with a hand as bad as 8 deuce suited. But I just checked it, and we saw a flop with 9,000 in the middle. The flop came Jack of clubs, 9 of hearts, Trey of diamonds. I have absolutely nothing. Zip and pip, as Vince Van Patten would say. And villain checks, I decided to fire one big blind, 3,600 into the middle. And the villain calls. Now the Wizard wants to check with my hand about 55% of the time, but it actually does exactly what I did 40% of the time, betting one big blind. The rest, you're going to bet 2 big blinds into the pot of 3 big blinds, but that's only 5%. So we like my play. We also like checking. Now there's 16,200 in the middle, and the board pairs. The top card, the Jack of diamonds, comes out. Villain checks again. I decided to put in 14,000 into the 16.2 thousand pot, and the villain made the call once again. So the small blind called me. Let's see what the Wizard has to say about my decision to fire and fire big on the turn. Well, with 8 deuce of spades, the Wizard wants to check about 73% of the time and bet 5 big blinds, which is what I did, about 3.5% of the time. So I can't exactly give myself credit for making this play, but I will say that it is technically solver approved. All right, so let's go to the river. With 44,000 in the middle, the river comes the 5 of spades, and villain checks one more time. I decided to go kind of small here, betting 5 big blinds into a pot of 12 big blinds. So about 40% pot is my bet sizing. And villain finally folds, and I finally get this one through. Although I have to admit, it took maximum effort on my part to do so. Let's see how the solver wants to play 8 deuce of spades in this situation. Remember, we have bet on the flop, on the turn, and now on the river. The solver wants to put it all in, guys, betting 28 big blinds into the pot of 15-ish big blinds. So guys, we are absolutely losing our minds here. We're betting almost 200% of the pot with 8 high, nothing at all. 82% of the time, that's the play. And the rest is a 13.5 big blind bet, which is right there around the size of the pot. So guys, we are not really getting too much approval from the solver. Betting my sizing just 5 or 6 big blinds less than 1% of the time. It's not technically a 0, but it may as well be. I think the solver is trying to tell me, if you're going to bet this river, you got to go for it and really pull the trigger. The solver doesn't like my 40% action, even though it happened to work for me in real time. So once again, guys, check out GTO Wizard. You can learn just like I'm learning on the go, going back and reviewing my hands and figuring out where all the many, many, many leaks in my game really are. Okay, guys, let's quickly do one more hand today for this episode. This is a $55 online PKO tournament. Very early. It's actually the first level. This thing just started, and I have decided to come out swinging. We've got 100 big blinds effective. The under the gun player makes it 2,500, so 2.5 big blinds. It folds all the way back to me in the big blind holding the 6 of clubs, 5 of spades. So hero with 6-5 offsuit. I decided to call and see a flop with my offsuit, unsuited connectors. I make the call, and now with 6,500 in the middle, the flop comes queen of diamonds, 7 of clubs, tray of diamonds. So queen 7 tray with 2 diamonds. I've got 6-5 for a gut shot with no diamond. And I decide to check, and villain bets big, 43.75 into the pot of 6,500. I decide to make that call. I'm going to be able to represent a lot of diamonds that might come off. I'm going to be able to represent a queen with a big river bet if the turn goes check, check. So I'm not just relying on my ability to hit a magical 4 to make a nut straight in this situation. I'm thinking about how else I can scheme and plot and try to win this hand. So now there's 15,000 in the middle, and the turn pairs the board with the 7 of spades. So our board is now queen of diamonds, 7 of clubs, tray of diamonds, 7 of spades, and I have just 6 high with some hope. And I decide to donk lead. I'm going to have, I think, a lot more 7x in my range than villain will have in his. And so I decide to bet the turn, representing that 7. Like, I don't want it to check through. I'm trying to get action from a hand like pocket kings, maybe ace queen. So I'm betting big here, trying to represent that I've got trips for a monster. I donk lead 11-5 into the 15,000 pot, and villain calls once more. And now with 38,000 in the middle, we're looking for the river. We want a 4, but instead it's the 9 of diamonds completing the flush. So our final board is queen of diamonds, 7 of clubs, tray of diamonds, 7 of spades, 9 of diamonds. Should I give up with my 6 high? I think the answer is absolutely not. I have a lot more flushes in my range. I have a lot more 7x in my range. I probably have more full houses in my range, given how many low cards there are on the board, and our opponent raised it from under the gun. Now, sometimes you can donk here on the river and get a crying call from a flush with a hand like king, jack of diamonds that's just worried that I have a better flush or a full house. I don't think you'll ever get raised unless your opponent has at least a full house. And it really doesn't matter if we get raised at all because we've only got 6 high. So who cares? I said on the flop that I would be able to represent the flush down the road. And here the flush comes in. And it's my last chance to win this hand. And I do not want to show down and lose to like a pair of 8s or something that we could probably get to fold right now with a big, strong, healthy bet. And I decide to make one. There's 38,000 in the middle. I put in 29,000 into the pot of 38K and villain folded almost instantly. So I really like this hand. I had a game plan, a 3-barrel bluff, and it's really, really fun. It's probably my favorite part of playing No Limit Hold'em tournaments is showing up in level 1, hand number 3, and just triple barreling half my stack off and finally getting it through on the river. And that'll do it for this episode. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know by leaving a nice 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartRadio or wherever else you might be listening. And for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas, please. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Lock in intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a my poker face. She's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read a my poker face. She's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me.